Hello, good evening. Welcome to Novara Live. I'm Aaron Bastani. We have such a fantastic show lined up for you this evening. I am joined down the line by Helena, aka No Justice MTG. Helena, how are we?
A spectre is haunting the UK, Aaron. The spectre of eco-populism with Polanski characteristics. I'm looking forward to the show and to be a left-wing Green Party member today.
That's true. You are a Green Party member. Of course, I recuse myself from the political process altogether. I'm absolutely judicious in my coverage. I neither fear nor favour anyone. I did vote Green at the last election, let's be honest. However, I will pull no punches when I speak later on to the newly elected leader of the Green Party, Zack Polanski. Elsewhere, at least 7 of the lead organisers of the civil liberties campaign group Defend Our Juries have had their homes raided and have been arrested under the Terrorism Act. We'll be talking about that as well. Really big stories tonight. It feels that the weather's not just changing, but the political weather too. Parliament's back. Keir Starmer gloomily said yesterday, well, the summer is over. It is. I'm feeling a vibe shift, although, of course, I want more nice, warm days, at least for a few more weeks. Please. If you want to follow our work and help our work, support our work, you can, of course, go to novaramedia.com/support. And make sure to let us know what you think using the comments in the YouTube chat, or just tweet at us using the hashtag NovaraLive. The summer is over. That's according to Keir Starmer anyway. And with Parliament coming back and the government having to govern, it means that Labour MPs are back from their holidays and watching the problems pile back up. For the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, the issues seem to never end. Inaccurate work details on LinkedIn. Crying in the House of Commons. Personal approval ratings so bad they would make Diddy blush. Wait, they dislike me that much? Yes, really, Rachel, they do. And then there's the small issue of a potential £40 billion shortfall in the autumn budget. Some are saying maybe $50 billion if you want to keep the old cushion. Tens of billions of pounds. You aren't going to find that down the back of the sofa, are you? And of course, that kind of discrepancy in spending will mean tax rises, spending cuts, or most likely both. A part of the reason the government is scrambling around for cash is that the costs of borrowing are really, really high. We often hear that word deficit. That relates to the budget deficit, which is how much more the government is spending than it's generating. Of course, almost all of the revenues government generates come via taxation. A surplus is generating more than you spend. A deficit is spending more than you generate. So where does the rest come from if you run a deficit? Who's paying for that deficit? Well, if you're Britain, you borrow that cash on international markets by selling gilts. These are coupons with a certain return. Let's say you buy £10,000 worth of 30-year gilts for £10,000. That's what you're spending. Each year, for 30 years, you'll get a small percentage of interest. And then, after 3 decades have elapsed, you'll have the principal of £10,000 returned to you. The more risky you are perceived as an investment, the higher the costs are for you to borrow as a country. And Britain is increasingly viewed as a rather risky bet. We know that because the interest rate on British gilts, the cost at which our government borrows money, is rising. Britain now has the highest costs of borrowing for any G7 economy. Yes, higher than Italy. The interest rate on 30-year government bonds, known as the yield, jumped to 5.698% today. That is its highest for 28 years. Just to go back to my original point, if you were to buy £10,000 worth of 30-year gilts at that yield today, then in 30 years' time, you get around £27,000 back. This is all a problem for government because higher costs of borrowing make deficits more of an issue. As you can see from this graph, Britain has been able to run large deficits for a long time, partly because the cost of borrowing was so low. From 2010 to 2022, the cost of borrowing only went down, the era of easy money, as we like to say, so low that by the early 2020s, the state could basically access money, as you can see, for next to nothing. It was almost free. And when markets are willing to lend to you so cheaply, it's much easier to make the argument to borrow money to grow the economy, which is precisely what David Cameron and Theresa May could have done, but chose not to, after 2010 and 2016, respectively. That rise after 2022 is a huge deal in terms of servicing the country's public debt. These numbers really are quite striking. You very rarely hear this, so I'm I'm really keen to lay these all out. For 2023-24, the deficit in this country was £120 billion. The public debt hit 100% of GDP that summer. And of course, a rising debt plus rising costs of borrowing mean much more is being paid on servicing the debt. The debt itself is bigger and the costs of interest are bigger. That meant that payments on the national debt doubled over 5 years, from around 5% of total government spending in 2019 to 10% in 2024. In 2019, the interest payments on our national debt were 51 billion. In 2024, 107 billion. So 51 to 107 billion pounds is a big, big difference. 107 billion pounds is broadly the same as the defence and policing budgets combined. So when the costs of borrowing are rising like this, and you run a deficit, and you have a large debt, and have had basically no meaningful growth for 17 years, yes, you have problems. Now, it's important to say that other countries have also seen their debt costs rising as well. But as I've already said, Britain does have the highest borrowing costs in the G7 right now. So why is this happening? Well, for some, the top reason is the UK has a bigger problem with inflation than other large economies. We've had it come back when nobody else really has. While for others, the UK's larger current account deficit, much bigger than it is for Eurozone countries, for instance, makes it more reliant on foreign investors. Not good. Helena, I know there was lots of words, lots of numbers for people, but whether you're looking at growth, productivity growth, of course, growth, whether you're looking at the costs of servicing the public debt, whether you're looking at the ability of the government to cut spending or increase taxes, it's all really bad for Rachel. It's bad from the perspective of being popular, and it's bad from the perspective of just actually working. And clearly, Labour aren't in a place to make difficult decisions around taxing the ultra-rich. Can she survive the whole of 2025, do you think?
I think it's unlikely. I think it's unlikely because the nitty-gritty of the economic realities of what the country looks like at the moment are being blamed on Rachel Reeves when, of course, I believe that a lot of her decisions can be blamed on her. But the situation that the country finds itself in cannot be blamed on her. It can be blamed, as you pointed out, on previous governments at times of low interest rates not engaging in the capital investment that she is currently investing in. Again, not to the extent that I would want to. I would want the fiscal rules to be different in terms of the way that it calculates net assets rather than net financial liabilities, to be able to allow more access to more capital investment while still sticking within those fiscal rules. I believe the fiscal rules could be much looser than they currently are, given the state of our economy, which no one's investing in terms of FDI because they can't guarantee a return, because no one can afford to spend, because the incomes of consumers have been squeezed so much over the last however many years. Your point on productivity is a really important one too, and the fact that there was a really great article by Francis Coppola the other day looking at the reality that the share of GDP growth that we've had, what little growth that we've had since 2010, pretty much all of it comes from an increased labor input, i.e., there are more people working and producing rather than the existing number of people working producing more. That's what's called total factor productivity, i.e., the amount of extra productive capacity that's created from making labor and capital do more, i.e., innovative investments, for example, which we've not had because things such as R&D development have been completely gutted by austerity, which could have been increased when interest rates were low. So our productivity problem has meant that we've had to rely on migration, and we can't invest in public services because we've not engaged in capital investment at a time when it was cheap. So a lot of the situations that we're in are outside of Reeves's control, especially when a lot of our gilt yields are very tied to geopolitical instability, given our close Atlanticist relationship with America, given that we've cut ourselves off from Europe, which is also making inflation worse because of the fact that we are less likely to trade with our closest neighbors and are trying to go further afield with all these other trade deals with India or Vietnam, United States, wherever it might be, which is actually less good at importing cheaper goods to ensure that we can keep the cost of living low. These are all things, again, completely outside of Rachel Reeves' control at time of recording. What's also outside of her control is that Labour have essentially cut off their ability to be able to deal with the financial shortfall that might be coming due to increased gilt yields and due to the fact that there is very little in terms of room that they can engage in extra taxation. And that was a decision that was made by people like Morgan McSweeney and Pat McFadden for political reasons in the run-up to the election. A lot of the easy levers to generate extra funding if she wants to stick within her fiscal rules, for example, on expenditure on day-to-day, so operational expenditure, maxing tax receipts, or matching tax receipts, sorry, which the NIESR predict will need to be, as you say, 40 billion extra by 2028, 2029. Well, the major levers have all been turned off because McSweeney felt we can't get elected if we say we're going to increase income tax, even if it's on the wealthiest, right? Like, most people didn't really disagree with the extra tax on the top 5% proposed by Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party in 2017 and 2019. There was that famous clip of the guy in the Question Time audience who looked massively out of touch because he earned over 80k and he felt like he was the median income earner when he just isn't. Most people look at an 80k earner and think that they're rich and don't mind them seeing them taxed more. But that's shut off for political reasons. And Rachel Reeves, whether or not she's part of that decision or not, I don't know. That was a political decision that's been taken, which is now in an economic reality where they need to find more taxes. Where I think that she's not going to last the rest of the year is that to fulfill this shortfall, she's either going to damage her reputation with Labour voters, which is already on thin ice as people don't like her over PIP cuts and over winter fuel cuts, which were her fault. Those decisions made as Chancellor, right? Like, these are things that are completely indefensible. I mean, the disability cuts that she was trying to push were depraved, quite frankly. That's already cut her off with Labour voters, but austerity isn't what they want anymore if they do cuts to try and deal with this shortfall to match those fiscal rules. And if she wants to start doing all these other taxes to try and fulfill that gap without going to the big levers that she's already turned off, it's going to have to be loads of nickel and diming taxes. That's going to be bad in the media regardless, because the media are the ones who'll get hit by it because they're more likely to be wealthy people who pay these other kinds of tax like national insurance on rental income or on capital gains or on dividends taxation or on what the other ones they've already done, like private schools, which journalists already got pretty mad about. And the more nickel and dime taxes you do, the more you look like a tax raiser because that's multiple headlines rather than just one increase on income tax for like the higher rate or the extra rate on top of that, if they did it for the top 5%. So there is no good choices here as far as Rachel Reeves is concerned, given that she's already set her own straitjacket by the current set of fiscal rules. I think there's a perfectly reasonable example that you could make extra deficit spending on operational expenditure in the NHS. I don't think that necessarily has to come from taxation because it's a pro-growth measure to get people who are sick into work. That will increase productivity, that will increase taxable returns, whilst coming from operational expenditure anyway, which doesn't have any extra capital investment that's relevant. But she can't make that argument because she's already set herself into that box of having to make overall operational expenditure be equal to taxable income. So there's precious little that she can do, where both the international situation that she's inherited, the previous poor decisions of the coalition government and onwards, she's inherited that too, and she has no choice in how she engages in changes to taxation because of people like McSweeney and McFadden. I should feel at least somewhat of a sympathy towards her because of these situations outside of her control, but she was the one who allied herself with this neoliberal political project from McSweeney, McFadden, Starmer, Labour together. I mean, she was one of the central figures of Labour together. So in that regard, she has nobody to blame but herself.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I mean, some of the people in the comments are saying you can just print money, get Richard Murphy on MMT. I don't agree with lots of that. I have to be quite frank with you. The United States, because of imperialism, the US can do that. The US can print infinity dollars and they can effectively borrow from the rest of the world, selling those dollars, i.e. giving them treasuries, and, that can fund loads of stuff domestically because the United States is an unrivaled global military hegemon. Britain doesn't have that. When we want to import food and energy, by the way, we have to import loads of those things. Your currency not massively devaluing kind of matters, kind of important. The rules are a bit different for the US, or very different, I should say, for the US. They're rather different for China as well. But the UK, as a big net importer of energy, big net importer of food, I'm sorry, I don't agree with those interpretations. Yes, if you want to talk about the United States, yes, that's broadly correct. It's not true for the UK. Otherwise, if you think that any country can just embark on a project of MMT, irregardless of other factors worldwide, then what's empire? How does the US even have an empire? Why does it have this giant military? None of it would make any sense. So I believe in the theory of super imperialism, so I don't really buy the whole MMT thing. What I would say is as well that the basic Keynesian understanding of this stuff historically has been that deficits are fine. Small deficits are fine, 3-4%. If you've got GDP growth of 2%, if you've got inflation of 2-3%, but it really doesn't matter. Net, you're even, right? The problem for the UK right now is that we haven't had productivity growth for 18 years. We are, not generating more and more value in terms of hours worked. Actually, it's flatlining. Some years it's been going down over the last 18 years. We are an increasingly large net importer of energy because, of course, North Sea oil is running out. Our demographic profile is bad. We've been underinvesting in infrastructure as a percentage of GDP, even compared to the Europeans for a really long time, even compared to the French. So all the fundamentals in this country are really, really bad. The idea that you can just say MMT, it's kind of like abracadabra. Okay, just my view. I know some people can disagree in the chat. That's fine. We can have those conversations. I'd also want to say really, really quickly, there is something that Reeves can do, which is she can build stuff because they changed the fiscal rules precisely to build stuff. I think this government should be building HS2 all the way to Manchester. I think they should be doubling down on these big infrastructure projects precisely in order to catalyze some growth. Growth is not the answer. You can watch my interview recently with Jason Hickel about growth ultimately not being the destination that socialists should be looking to. But in the short to medium term, you could do that through building sustainable infrastructure, public transit, renewable energy, etc., borrowing to do that, borrowing for the future. They're not doing that. And they're not doing that because they're saying, well, they're too expensive, these projects. Fine. Manage them to be cheaper. Make that a matter of national, political, and dare I say, security urgency. That's where I would disagree with her. But you're absolutely right, Helena. This is decades in the making, this stuff. And it's certainly at least 14 years plus in the making, 15 years now, with the Tories after 2010. David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson could have built so much stuff which would have created so much future use value for people for hundreds of years, right? Which is what people did when they built the railways in this country, when they built the London Underground, when they built bridges and houses. These are all things that have use value long after the people that built those things die. We've not done that, okay? And we're doing that less than other European countries. Go to a medium-sized French city. Go to Dijon. Look at the tram system. Then go to Derby or go to Portsmouth or go to Newport, similar-sized places. They don't look the same, folks. Hate to break it to you. We'll be talking to Zack Polanski in a few minutes. Before we do, final thoughts on this story, Helena?
When it comes to MMT, I'm perfectly amenable to a lot of these arguments, right? But one of the clear things that people like Warren Mosler and Stephanie Kelton set out with MMT is that the two things you have to understand is that spending should be used to mobilize real resources, which I think is perfectly reasonable when you look at the NHS and say we should spend more, regardless whether it's a deficit or not, to ensure that we are mobilizing the resources that is people who are too sick to work, who could be not too sick if they were better. Because that's a real resource that you're mobilizing by this deficit spending, for example. You look at construction, we need more, as you say, infrastructure, we can spend that, right? That's mobilizing a real resource. The other thing that's important, though, is that the one thing that puts pay to that, we have to start engaging in taxation, is when you're in an inflationary environment. And because of trade barriers that have been put up, and other things such as the climate crisis making it harder and making it more expensive for things like food production, those inflationary environments are going to be far, far more frequent. So there's a difference between just spending any amount of money, right? Like the reality of MMT that we can't really go bust because you're a sovereign currency issuer, that's all perfectly true. All of this kind of talk in the Telegraph and places like that, there's going to be an IMF bailout, nonsense. I don't believe a word of that. But you're right to say that the two things you need to really look out for are, is inflation high and are you maintaining currency value? And the currency looks okay at the moment. I think there's probably some room, but inflation is a real problem. And if they really do start helicopter moneying for things like welfare, that could exacerbate that inflationary pressure. And as we've seen from all the elections from the pandemic period onward, inflation is not a vote winner. So I don't think that they're going to look at that. But I think that the argument is a lot more nuanced than a lot of MMT proponents who are just saying we can spend as much as we want are saying. I would agree with you there.
We have had Stephanie Kelton on. Maybe it's time that Stephanie came back. Fascinating debate. But fundamentally, I think Rachel Reeves, let's go back to the politics of all of this. Rachel Reeves is in big trouble with this autumn budget. She's going to be massively unpopular. I was looking at opinion polling earlier on today. She's 1 point better off than Donald Trump. I think she's going to be significantly down on the Donald in 2 to 3 months' time. As Zack Polanski has achieved a landslide victory in the race to become leader of the Green Party. As you can see here in this graph from friend of Novara, Stats for Lefties, Polanski achieved a stunning 84.6% of the vote, while Green MPs Adrian Ramsey and Ellie Chowns got just 15.4%. That is an overwhelming mandate from Green Party members for Polanski's populist left-wing offer, with Zack getting over 20,000 votes to Chownes's and Ramsey's 3,000 ballots that were cast. And as Polanski's victory was announced, this video dropped.
Why is everything so shit? Our wages are shit.
500,000 workers protesting over pay, jobs and conditions.
Our rivers are swimming in shit.
Across England last year, raw sewage spilled down to England's rivers, lakes and coastal waters.
And most politicians, they're full of it too.
Order! Order!
And here's the truth. Those same politicians sold you out. The people you voted for, your supposed representatives, they stopped serving you a long time ago and now entirely serve big business. And once you see it, everything clicks. Follow the money, and you will see both Starmer and Farage whining and dining hedge fund billionaires, oil and gas companies, arms traders, same dealers, same game. So what am I going to do that's different? I'm Zack Polanski, the new leader of the Green Party. And for starters, I'm saying this out loud. That's going to make me enemies fast. But I'm not here to make friends with the people wrecking this country. I'm here to take them on. And I know I'm not doing this alone.
Perhaps Polanski is taking some cues from the success of Zohran Mamdani across the Atlantic in New York City. This is an extremely Mamdani-coded clip. And left-wing's success at the top of the Greens didn't stop with Polanski. Leeds councillor Mothin Ali and Sussex Council co-leader Rachel Millward were elected Deputy Green Party leaders. Ali, who we've previously interviewed on Novara Live, intervened to calm tensions in his local community during unrest last summer. Membership of the Greens reached a record high of 68,000 people during the leadership campaign. And here's what new leader Polanski had to say in his victory speech today.
People in this country are exhausted. They are tired. They are sick of working long hours and never feeling secure. They see water companies pumping sewage into our waters and charging us extra for the privilege. And they see how broken the old two-party system is. And we know this political space has been ripe for charlatans like Nigel Farage and reform. Millionaires who are pretending to serve working class communities, but are actually backed by the same billionaires who are destroying our democracies, our communities, and our planet. So it is an absolute moral responsibility in this moment for the Green Party to step up with the bold politics that I know that we have, to say to people that we can and we will lower your bills. We will nationalise the water companies. We will hold this Labour government to account.
Polanski also announced where his first stop as Green Party leader would be.
I am straight to UVW, that's United Voices of the World. This is a migrants' union. And let's be clear, this is a total show of intent of what this party is. We listen to the poorest communities, whether they're migrant communities, disabled communities, the trans community, working class communities. Whoever needs us to have their back, we will be there. We will be there to amplify their voices, to listen to the most marginalised and minority communities, to speak with them, not for them, and challenge truth to power, to take on power and wealth in this country. And we absolutely recognise that migrants are very much the backbone of this country. Our country has problematic history that we also need to come to terms with, but also we have a beautiful history, a beautiful present, and a beautiful future of what we are when communities come together.
United Voices of the World is a grassroots trade union for low-paid migrant and precarious workers, if you've not heard of them before. And Polanski is deliberately planting his flag, so to speak, in a political moment when migrants and asylum seekers are increasingly demonised across the main parties. At his victory press conference, Polanski was asked whether he would work with or have an alliance with Jeremy Corbyn and Zohra Sultana's tentatively titled Your Party. This is how he answered.
In terms of the new party, I think this really speaks to the political moment. Keir Starmer is failing so badly that not only are the Green Party massively surging to his left, a movement that doesn't even exist yet. We don't even know what their policies are. People are saying anything but that, anything but the old political system. Now, I and the party clearly have a job to do to speak to those people who haven't yet joined the Green Party, to say, if you believe in environmental, social, racial and economic justice, if you want to see climate action, protect nature, workers' rights, lower bills, then join the Green Party, because this is the exact place for you. It's too soon to talk about joining or electoral coalitions. I'm actually going to steal a line from John McDonnell. I'm being fair and crediting him rather than pretending it was my own original thought. He said he's not interested right now in electoral coalitions. He's interested in intellectual coalitions. And I think that's a really sharp phrase, Because I know the MPs, in fact, anyone in the party, wants to work, and as they do in Parliament, with anyone who wants to challenge a failing Labour government and take on fascism and the far right.
Such an impressive response, I think, just then. That was actually, we played three clips there. I thought that final one was really, really polished. And now we're joined, and that wasn't why I was complimenting him, by the brand new leader of the Green Party Live, Zack Polanski. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on, Aaron. It really feels fitting on this day where it's been a lot of celebration, a lot of victory to spend some time with Novara. So thank you for all that you do.
Our pleasure. Were you expecting to win by such a large margin? 85% of the vote is really enormous, isn't it?
I absolutely wasn't expecting it at all. A journalist asked me earlier today that I looked almost a little bit sick when the results were read out, which they weren't expecting. And I was just honest. I just said the kind of magnitude of the moment struck me. And I don't think you wouldn't be human if it didn't. And, within a few minutes, I kind of settled and said, okay, it's time to be leader now. Let's go. But there was definitely a moment where I was like, gosh, people really do want bold leadership.
We now know that at its peak, it may have gone down, but at its peak, the Green Party has in the mid-60s, 65,000 plus members. What do you think is a reasonable upper limit for Green Party membership by the next general election? What's the highest you think it could be? What's the ceiling? And I know you're going to say, well, there is no ceiling, but you must have some sort of target in mind, surely.
You kind of gave the answer straight away that I don't want there to be a ceiling, but I'll explain why. So, as you just said, I've just come from meeting the migrants at UVW. And one of the guys who was speaking, this is a guy who works in St. Hilda's Hospital. They're porters, caterers, and cleaners. And he was talking about the outrageousness of the fact that they're not being paid properly, that the hospital are withdrawing milk that's supplied to them at lunch, which is, a couple of quid. Yet the CEOs and executives are taking huge amounts in bonuses. And I went straight from there to speak to Sophie Ridge on Sky News. And I felt the fury of having just listened to this man and then have a conversation about migration and small boats. And the reason why I'm saying this to you is if I can feel the fury, my job is to communicate that fury. And I think when people can feel that the fury is being communicated properly and that there's a possibility for it to be turned into hope, to be turned into tangible solutions, then I don't know why lots of people will not join the Green Party. And I think people will see a lot more of the Green Party in the weeks and months to come. So where do I want membership to be? Let's say, 100,000 feels like that's unambitious fairly soon, but that's certainly the next target, so to speak. But in terms of where can it be in the next general election, I want us to keep growing and growing. The amount of attention today has been phenomenal. It's attention that the Green Party's never really had before. The real question then is, with that attention, do we keep that momentum to keep people joining the party, keep the movement going? And I'm absolutely convinced we can do that.
Ahead of the result, there was some discourse around there being, a discord between you and the people you were running against. That was Adrian Ramsey and Ellie Chandler running on a combined ticket as co-leaders. I think some of those differences were overstated, but it's fair to say that politically you're quite different to them. Now, of course, political parties are always umbrellas. They bring people together. That's the point. Do you think you might face something of a struggle, though, to integrate those particular individuals within your leadership, given that they're parliamentarians? They have a big profile that you don't have. Unlike the other major parties, the leaders of those major parties are in Parliament. You're not. Do you think that's going to present problems for you?
So there's two parts to that question. I think the first part is, will there be disagreements? Absolutely. We're a political party. And I think if we're not having disagreements, then are you actually dealing with the challenges of the day? And I really encourage constructive disagreements that are heated moments where you decide, you really argue and kind of almost have a workshop on what is the communication that you're putting across. But I think the more serious question that underlies that is the fact that me and Adrian in particular have worked together in a leadership team now for 3 years, and we've worked incredibly well together. In fact, so well that we've had our best results ever. I have absolutely no doubt that we'll continue to work that professional relationship. Hand on heart, would I rather it was a bit more interpersonal? I like to be mates with the people around me. No, but I think, people just aren't bothered about that. I think people want to know, are the political party working to lower their bills? Are they looking to challenge the government? Are they looking to tackle the far right? And I have no doubt that alongside the four MPs, there is absolute common cause in doing the things that we need to do in this country. And that's really not one of my concerns. I think it's one of those things that has been overstated.
What are your targets for the next 12 months? Zack Polanski on his to-do by the end of 2026, what are we talking about here? Have you got certain targets you want to reach, certain objectives you want to accomplish?
Yeah, the media is very much in my sights, first of all. So I know we've had this conversation before, but the media, the Green Party traditionally have not got the media and airtime that they deserve. And deserve is a careful word, because, who deserves anything? But reform get constant media. It is wall-to-wall media. Now, I can carry on complaining about that, and I'm certainly happy to whine about it every so often. Or we can go, what do we need to do differently to cut through? So my first target is the video you just showed, the beach video that I had. There's more of this stuff coming. In fact, there's some exciting news happening tomorrow as well. And that's going to be kind of building the way that I communicate with the public, with the party members, but more widely to the country. I think second, there's those 39 seats where we came in second place. I think mission critical, or the first mission, is to turn those into first. So how do you start to look at where you came second place? What do you need to do? But the limit isn't just there either, because 2 of the seats that we won at the general election, we actually came from 4th or 5th place to come to first place. So with the right messaging, with the right resourcing and volunteer recruitment, there's nowhere we can't win. Now, that's not me saying we are going to, go everywhere and win everywhere. That's clearly not going to happen for any political party. You have to target and you have to focus. But I think one of the next targets is, what is the conversation we have about exactly where we're targeting and focusing? And how do we make sure that the party more widely is really bought into the vision of what does this look like? And then finally, I'd say this mission starts today, which is, we know the Labour Party are obsessed with reform. They're obsessed with Nigel Farage. I'm really pleased, and this is going to sound odd, but I'm really pleased at the moment I won today, the Labour press office put out a press statement that was essentially a character assassination of me, or an attempted 1-2. That tells me they're rattled, and that's exactly where I want them to be. The Labour Party could have taken the smart decision today, which I think is the kind of thing Sadiq Khan would have said, which is, congratulations to Zack, he's on the progressive wing of politics. We look forward to cooperating with him, but here's the reasons why you shouldn't vote Green. So it's a kind of very cautious, nod. This was a complete opposite. This was recognizing that I'm going to be talking about tackling inequality. I'm going to be talking about the genocide in Gaza. I'm going to be talking about Labour's vested interests in the corporate capital that party is absolutely in hock to. And I think that does terrify the Labour Party. It doesn't terrify them yet in the same way that Farage does. And so that's why our party keeps swinging to the right. My central mission is to make sure that Keir Starmer becomes obsessed, not just with me, but with the Green Party and their entire movement, because I think that's how we change politics right now, and we don't even have to wait until the next general election.
My final question, Zack, and thanks for giving us, almost 10 minutes of your time on a really, really important big day. Some would say that you guys, the Green Party, and of course this new Left Party with Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, you will break up Labour's coalition. Yes, the Greens could do extraordinarily well. They could win dozens of seats maybe at the next election. Most of those will be Labour seats. I believe you're second in 40 seats, 39 of those are Labour seats. And all that's doing is handing the keys to Nigel Farage in order to step into number 10 and become the next Prime Minister. What would your response be to that line of criticism?
Give us proportional representation. How dare Keir Starmer, when his members and the unions say we want proportional representation, look at all of the members of the union and go, no, we're not doing that, we're sticking to first past the post, and then have the chutzpah of the audacity at the next general election to go, you have to vote for Keir Starmer, you're going to get Nigel Farage. That will totally be on him. Now, I'm not willing to wait until the next general election to have that conversation. So if Keir Starmer wants to introduce proportional representation, I don't think he's going to, but if he does, this would change the dynamic of this conversation. I think there would be a legitimacy to what does the left need to do to work together with a party we strongly dislike or a government we strongly dislike for the greater good, to get a change in the electoral voting system so we can have proper and democratic elections in the future. I don't think any of that's going to happen. I also, and I think this is important, I really like Jeremy Corbyn. I like Zara Sultana. Personal relationships are important, and I absolutely align with most of what they stand for. That's not me kind of quietly being quiet about differences. We don't know what this party is going to stand for yet, so I'm just being cautious before that's set up. Jeremy, on Thursday and Friday, is setting up a Gaza inquiry in Westminster. This is where the government told him he couldn't have an independent inquiry. Massive respect to Jeremy Corbyn. He just said, okay, the government's not going to give it me. I'm going to make it happen anyway. And I think this is an example of where you can see a politician from another party or potentially another party and go, you know what? That's perfect. And I absolutely want to align with the things that you're doing there. You'd also expect me to say this, but my main focus right now is growing the Green Party, making sure we're not having conversations right now about what the future of our party is or what our policies are. We are up and running right now. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to anyone involved with the new party. The biggest thing I'd say to you, and you can probably relate to this, Aaron, is I'm sick of being on media panels where I'm the only left voice and the only left voice all day. I obviously want more green voices on media, but actually if there are people on the left who are saying similar things that I am, and we have a diversity of messengers in this country to challenge reform and challenge the Labour government, then I think that's totally a positive thing. And the final thing I want to say, and I'm saying at the end, so I can't be accused of being a kiss ass, is you don't need to thank me for your time. Novara Media is incredibly important in this space, and the the operations of a project that we want to do. And people must support independent media, because we know legacy and mainstream media have, most of them, utterly failed us. And actually, this is the time to have new media that's independent, that will hold politicians to account, that will be transparent about things, but also to tell the truth.
Zach, it's a great place to spend on. And again, congratulations. 85% is a heck of a lot. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron.
85%. That was very kind of Zach, by the way. Just to be clear, again, I'm not a Green Party member. Helena is. I voted Green at the last election, but I'm not a Green Party member precisely because if the Greens do something I disagree with, I want to be able to say it, right? I think in the last election, they were wrong about HS2 and about nuclear power. I still voted for them. Nobody's perfect. I do agree, though, about the need for more left-wing voices in the media. You know, I did the BBC a couple of weeks ago now, BBC Radio 5, and I was on with the guy from the Times, and they said, so-and-so from the Times newspaper. And they said, Aaron Bastani from left-wing, radical left, Novara Media. I'm saying, oh, hold on, it's owned by Rupert Murdoch. Why don't you introduce them as Rupert Murdoch? Rupert Murdoch owned. I was half expecting the line to go dead, but they let me carry on. Anyway, let's look at some reactions to Zack Polanski's election as leader of the Greens. There were warm welcomes from the co-founders of the New Left Party. This was from Jeremy Corbyn. Congratulations to Zack Polanski on your stunning victory. Your campaign took on the rich and powerful, stood up for the dignity of all marginalised communities, and gave people hope. Real change is coming. I look forward to working with you to create a fairer, kinder world. Meanwhile, Zara Sultana posted this. Congratulations, Zack Polanski, on being elected Green Party leader. At a time when Labour protects the super rich and reform fuels hatred, the real answers lie not in scapegoating, but in bold visions of justice, equality, and climate action. I look forward to working together. A former Green Party leader, as well as their first ever MP, Caroline Lucas, said this. Big congratulations, Zack Polanski. Really gracious in victory and hugely ambitious for party. As he said in his acceptance speech, the Greens aren't here to be disappointed by Labour. We are here to replace them and to challenge power and wealth in this country. Join us. Wow, strong words. Some Liberals, though, still haven't read the room. This was from online commentator Supertansky. So, a white middle-class man has become leader of the Green Party. That's about as groundbreaking as a Tory sex scandal. She wisely deleted that post. But I should say, I kind of remember her being a big fan of Keir Starmer for the last 4 years. You know, a straight white dude. Again, I literally don't care. I literally don't care. A straight white dude, he should be the prime minister. By the way, Zack Polanski is Jewish. I think he's the first openly gay party leader as a sole leader of a party in British history. By the way, nobody's mentioning that. But he's the problem, but I can shill for Keir Starmer for 4 years. Make it make sense. However, the most desperate response came from none other than Labour's press office with this. Meet Zack Polanski. This is the person who the Greens just elected as their new leader. They've shared a link from the Sun newspaper. And that link says this, for people who are listening on the podcast, I'll read it to you. Has the time come when we can burn all those uncomfortable push-up bras? Hypnotherapist Zack Polanski reckons so. He says he can boost your cup size using the mind alone. Quote, this is an extremely new approach, but I can see it becoming popular very quickly because it's so safe and a lot cheaper than a boob job says. By the way, because I'm a weird person, in terms of hypnosis having an impact on breast size, there is actually a scholarly research field on this. There are some research papers from the 1970s saying that, yes, hypnosis can increase breast size because hypnosis can create more of this hormone or that hormone. To be clear, I don't think that. It's been discredited by more recent science, but there is something of a literature on it. Interesting, though, that a political party which is helping aid and abet a genocide, which has killed 16,000 plus children, has more problems with hypnosis. Cardiff East MP Jo Stevens wasn't impressed either. She said this, just awful. Now, I don't know. Can we read this again? Look, is Jo Stevens saying just awful about Zack Polanski or about her party's response? I think it's about Zack Polanski, right? Just awful. How awful. How awful. Just awful. What an awful man. You know, we've got RAF flights every day giving reconnaissance to the IDF to kill thousands of children, but just awful. He's hypnotizing women to help them with their body image. Just awful. Disgusting. Outrageous. Just awful. Get some perspective. Please. Helena, could the boobnosis line stick?
Well, given this is a quote from The Sun, I find it very surprising that the newspaper of page 3 might have some opposition to the idea that people are getting bigger tits. So fundamentally, I think that this is something from a different era of politics. Fundamentally, it's part of this kind of the centrist optics brigade that represents the kind of right wing of the Labour Party, who believe that they can essentially smear people with these kind of attacks that they don't like to make them look like they are politically irrelevant. When we are seeing the results of the kind of politics that the Labour writers represented fail time and time and time again in terms of people's actual material conditions, and any concerns around what someone did a decade ago is completely irrelevant to most people who want to see their food get cheaper, their bills more affordable, and their wages go up and their rent go down. That's the reality that people actually care about. They actually care about what are the government going to do to help them and help their families and help society heal itself, given the divisions that we are currently seeing on our streets every single day. An ill-judged moment from somebody from 10 years ago would be a scandalous piece of political theatre. A, if it was any time recent, and B, if we were living in the political era that the Labour right seemed to continually live in, this 1997 era of politics, which doesn't exist anymore. The times have changed, and you cannot just rerun the Blairite playbook and pretend that you're the adults in the room compared to the student politics of the left, when you don't actually have any serious political and policy responses to the kind of multi-crises that we're currently seeing in terms of domestically, geopolitically, economically, socially, whatever it might be. There seems to be so many things creaking at the seams in this country that whatever Zack was doing as a hypnotherapist, getting stung by the Murdoch rags, however it was, however long ago, is completely irrelevant to politics in 2025. Although what I will say, the Labour Party continually approvingly quoting The Sun's journalism, or indeed Keir Starmer writing for The Sun, or indeed having somebody from The Sun becoming his director of communications, should tell you a lot about this party and who they stand for and who they represent. Their conference is in Liverpool, as it usually is, right? I don't think the scouts of this world are going to be too pleased to find out about these kind of things and the relationships between the Murdoch press and the current leadership of the Labour Party. At the very least, Zack is a man who has some principles, or at least apologises when he gets things wrong, but would never write in a rag like The Sun.
Yeah. I'm just still thinking about just awful. Can you imagine? Where were you 10 years ago? Well, I was voting to reform welfare so that the poorest people in this country got even less. What were you doing? I was hypnotizing people, some of which was related to body image. You bastard! I was taking money away from people with no arms and legs, but you were hypnotizing people to make them feel better about themselves. How dare you? The complete lack of perspective from the permanent political class in this country, most of all, by the way, from Labour, is something to behold. They have absolutely no perspective. These people genuinely believe what Zack Polanski did. They genuinely believe that's more morally disagreeable than arming Israel, or than giving them, which we are, a ton of reconnaissance. Giving them a ton of reconnaissance to prosecute a genocide. They genuinely think that is worse than the other one. And I'll tell you why, because I've been up close and personal with people for 15 years. They think that it's worse because they're on the other side, right? What I do is the good thing because I'm the good person. That's literally their moral starting point. I'm the good person, therefore what I say is the good thing, and because I'm the good person, if you disagree, that makes you the bad person. This is the modus operandi of the Labour Centre. And it's morally vacuous. And it's politically vacuous, as we've seen over the last 13 months while they've been in government. Before we go to our next story, one way to support our work here at Novara Media is through buying merchandise from our shop. All the profits of the books, t-shirts, and bags you can find there go directly to funding Novara Media's journalism in print. It's not in print, but it's in words, in podcasts, and on the screen with things like Downstream and, of course, Novara Live. All our t-shirts are printed by I Dress Myself. They are a real living wage employer, and the supply chains for the t-shirts are exceptional. Unionized labor, organic cotton. I have to say, I think it's terrific stuff. The tracksuit bottoms, which we no longer sell, I still have them. Maybe we'll start those up again. They are the most comfortable tracksuit bottoms I've ever had. I wear these t-shirts all the time, not to promote Novara Media, sorry, but because the supply chains are outstanding, really comfortable, actually. If this wasn't branded, I would still buy it. You can't do that, of course, because these are wholesale t-shirts from Stanley and Stella. Fantastic stuff. So if you want to buy t-shirts with amazing supply chains and to help our work here at Novara Media, go to shop.novaramedia.com to see what we have. Great stuff there. I just bought a few t-shirts from my dad and his partner. They love them. Like I say, so comfortable. I am not shilling right now, okay? Genuinely comfortable stuff. This is the Calvin Klein underwear of t-shirts as far as I'm concerned. Let's see what you've got to say for yourselves in the Comstock. We've got at Starships D or at Starship SD. Didn't cause any problems for Farage to not be an MP most of the time, did it? Reform generally didn't have MPs, although they did have a few MPs from by-elections, that's fair. If anything, a non-MP has more time in which to devote to leadership roles. Very true. It's still unusual, but that's very true. I think the right person can do a fantastic job outside Parliament. I actually think you're right. The right person can make it an asset, not a liability. At Taya Fraser, 8059 with £4.99. Helena for leader of literally anything. Helena, quickly, what's your response to that? Would you be the leader of literally anything?
I mean, it depends what it is. I've always tried to stay away from politics. I'm a bit of a divisive figure, and I think I'd be particularly unifying for anyone who didn't agree with me. But you know what? If I was going to be leading something that was a little less contentious, maybe I'd lead the Magic the Gathering team. Certainly be up for that.
I think they mean politics, right? But Helena, because you're a Green Party member. Would you ever actually seek elected office? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, people have asked me plenty of times, but there are numerous reasons why I would not want to. And sadly, I think one of the reasons I would not want to do so is I just don't want to be a trans person in the public eye at this point. No, I would rather not have to deal with lots and lots of very nasty words thrown my way. Get enough as a YouTuber, political platform, probably something I would avoid.
Yeah, I totally understand. Personally, people have said this to me. Would you go to politics? I'd like to be maybe a mayor. That seems really fun, and you can do a lot. An MP, you're a cog in a machine, frankly. That can change, of course. But a mayor seems really good. You can do a heck of a lot, and you can really set an agenda. Look at what Burnham's doing in Greater Manchester. And by the way, Greater Manchester, or the Manchester metro area, by the standards of European cities, they do not have many powers. Look what the Paris mayor, Anne Hidalgo's done with regards to cycling in that city. Phenomenal. I would totally do that. If you want to make me the mayor for the new Hampshire super region, which we're going to get next year, great. I don't think I'd want to be an MP. Councillor as well. Great job. People say I love, grassroots organising and helping people. And just like the Black Panthers, you should run for council. That's kind of what you're meant to do. Police have arrested at least 7 key spokespeople campaigning against the prescription of direct action group Palestine Action. In dawn raids across the country this morning, 7 people from Defend Our Juries were arrested under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act. The number of arrests went from 5 to 7. This came just hours before they were scheduled to give a press conference on Saturday's upcoming protest. Here's the moment. 25-year-old Paddy Friend, a law student, was arrested under terrorism law.
So this is what happens in Britain in 2025.
Right, give me your hand.
Opposing genocide.
Right, just watch your wrist there. Alright, so Patrick, this is Bullen from New Scotland Yard, just to say warrant casting in plain clothes, okay? I'm recording everything. So I'm going to be placing you under arrest, okay? And I'm going to read out the reason for that. The time now is 7:10 in the morning, it's the 2nd of September. So, Patrick, you are under arrest on suspicion of committing the offence of Section 12, subsection 3 of the Terrorism Act 2000. You are alleged to have addressed an online Zoom meeting between the 10th of July 2025 and the 21st of August 2025 for the purpose of encouraging support and furthering the activities of prescribed organisation Palestine Action. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention a question, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. So the arrest is necessary to prevent loss of evidence, prevent collusion with co-suspects, and to allow for searches under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and to facilitate a police interview. Okay, so that's the reasons for your arrest today. We will be taking you to a police station, as I just mentioned.
So, if everyone's happy, we'll take Patrick out. Okay. Right, Patrick, if you just follow my colleague, I'll stand behind you. Right, we'll see you later. Cheers.
As you heard there a moment ago, Paddy was arrested for allegedly speaking at Zoom meetings for the purpose of encouraging support for and furthering the activities of Palestine Action. The Zoom calls in question were public and intended to provide legal briefings for those who signed up to take part in actions to protest the prescription of Palestine Action. Palestine Action is, of the 10th of July this year, prescribed as a terrorist organisation under UK law. It is the first non-violent direct action group to be prescribed in that way. And being a member of or encouraging support for the group is now an offence punishable by up to 14 years in prison. Also arrested in this morning's dawn raids was former government lawyer Tim Crossland, who co-founded Defend Our Juries. No one has so far been arrested for taking part in or joining Zoom calls, only the hosts of the Zoom calls. Amnesty International has called the arrests a, quote, blatant attempt to muzzle free speech. And Amnesty Campaign's director, Kerry Moscow-Gorio, said this in a statement earlier today. Criminalising speech or protest is only permitted when it incites violence, hatred, or discrimination. To be clear, expressing support for Palestine Action does not meet this threshold. In fact, arresting and prosecuting people in this context is a violation of the UK's obligations under human rights law. Amnesty calls for the immediate and unconditional release of these people and yet again implores the government to redirect its energy from criminalising peaceful demonstrators to focusing on taking immediate and unequivocal action to put a stop to Israel's genocide and ending any risk of UK complicity in it. Despite the raids, Defend Our Juries will be going ahead with its action as planned on Saturday. At least 1,000 people have signed the pledge to hold signs in Parliament Square that read, quote, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action, and risk arrest under UK terror law. Earlier today, I caught up with Angie Zelter. She's a peace activist and Nobel Peace Prize nominee with decades of experience and over 100 arrests to her name in countries across the world, not just here in the UK. I began by asking Angie about her two most recent arrests.
The first was the most interesting because I was interrogated by the counter-terrorism police in Brixton's police station. And I usually self-represent, and I didn't have a lawyer present. And I basically said to him, aren't you feeling really uncomfortable because you're not doing your real job? We are obviously not terrorists and you're wasting your time and you know we're not terrorists. So why aren't you complaining about it to your upper? And he looked very, very ashamed in a way. And he carried on with his questions about, you know, where did you get the idea? Who told you to do it? Did you sign your own placard and all that kind of thing? To which I didn't answer very many questions. But I was just saying to him, look, you should be dealing with the real terrorists, not stopping peaceful protest. This arrest when the 500 took place was just amazing. That took ages to get us. There was further south, a police station there, weren't interrogated, and both times released under bail conditions.
What do you think the purpose of these arrests is?
It's to satisfy the Israeli Zionists who are really pushing our government to stop any protest. They even have their people inside the BBC so that most people don't get the real information about what's going on. So they're just trying to make sure that this doesn't continue. What they don't realise is the more repressive a government becomes, the more determined people are to resist. Because this is a genocide. It is absolutely horrendous. And the majority of people in this country cannot stand the fact that we're doing nothing about it. We're selling them arms. We're still trading with them. We train their soldiers here. We train their pilots. We're about to give them a contract to train our soldiers into how to kill people because they've got so much experience about this. which is disgusting because they're not doing it according to international law. And the only thing that makes a soldier not a murderer is when they are given permission to do it because they're keeping within international law. So our soldiers are going to be trained by murderers to be murderers.
You said that the officer you were speaking to sort of looked a bit downtrodden, and then a moment ago you mentioned the Zionist lobby and the efforts to effectively appease the Zionist lobby through these mass arrests. I wonder, is the lobby trying to operate through the Home Office, the Home Secretary, the government, and then of course they then push this down to the level of operational policing, the Metropolitan Police Service, etc. Do you think there's maybe a tension there potentially at some point if this carries on between the police and the Home Office?
Well, I would hope that there's a tension across all government ministries and the judiciary, because we know, luckily from independent journalists, because the mainstream doesn't cover all of this stuff, how many Israeli delegations have been to the Attorney General, to the Home Secretary, to the Defense Secretary, and how disgusting the Israeli ambassador is in this country, and yet she's not told to go. There must be tensions. I mean, we know there's tensions within the BBC. 111, I think, some of BBC people have spoken out against the fact that it's biased reporting. It's not honest reporting. We know that there's a lot of lawyers who've written out and said, look, this is not you're breaking international law. You're putting Britain into a terrible situation here. So there must be, within all branches of our society, a deep unease about what's going on, because we're human beings, and the majority of human beings, when they see what's happening in Gaza, and now today in the West Bank, we are now hearing that Smotrich has said that there's been more demolitions in the West Bank in the last year than ever before, and that they are putting in huge restrictions. They're not going to be allowing students to get to schools or nurses and doctors to get to hospitals. This is in the West Bank, more illegal settlements. So they're going in because they're realizing that the majority of the world is against what they're doing, and they want to take as much land and create as many facts on the ground as possible, as quickly as possible. So while attention is on Gaza, they're taking over the West Bank as well.
You're a veteran activist and you've been arrested almost 200 times. You've obviously got a massive amount of experience in this field. It's very important to say, of course, you have been arrested almost 200 times. You have not been charged almost 200 times. Does this arrest or this series of arrests pertaining to Palestine Action, does this whole episode feel different in any way to your decades-long experience of activism and being arrested?
First of all, let me say all of my protests are totally non-violent, okay? All of them. And that have been in many different countries. This arrest feels very, very different because Britain is very, very different. We are sliding towards a dictatorship, a fascist dictatorship. And it is absolutely outrageous that this government has been supporting Israel in its genocide. That is what is so different. And the amount of repression. Now, this is the first time that I've been in a campaign where counter-terrorism and the police have asked Zoom to close down meetings of maybe several hundred people who are trying to get a legal training or non-violence training to do with Defend Our Juries. They close it down at the last minute. So different platforms have had to be used. And then spokespeople just about to go this morning to a press conference to explain what we're going to be doing on Saturday and why, have had dawn raids and are now being questioned by the police and being charged or arrested anyway under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act. I didn't think that I lived in a society where peaceful protest would be so outlawed. It's been happening bit by bit. People haven't been noticing the slide with our civil rights being taken away from us. But we've now got to a point which is absolutely horrendous now. And I think that is why so many people are coming out and getting arrested, even though the implications of being arrested for terrorism are quite severe.
I mean, the point you make about Zoom, which of course is an American company, it's quite extraordinary. It's a company where freedom of speech, freedom of political assembly, etc., are enshrined in law. That's not to say the United States is perfect, but they're enshrined in law in a way that they aren't in this country. and a company from that country is doing things here which it probably legally would not be able to do in the United States. I mean, that is quite something. In regards to Zoom, are you making any next steps? Are there any sort of lines of inquiry you're trying to open up about that? Because that does seem like something that most people would simply not agree with, this idea that an American company can just scrap an ability for free citizens to discuss something which is totally within the limits of the law.
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinary, but then just think what the States is going through. They have got a horrendous leader at the moment, is taking horrendous steps to close down all kinds of debate there, and also interfering in the judiciary and taking over. Again, we have a populist leader who is taking the rights away of human beings in the States. So I don't think we can trust American technology and American Zooms and things anymore. What this is doing to the protest movement, I think, is making us more aware that we have to choose alternatives. In just the same way, if we want to get the news, we go to alternative media now. We make sure that we get the news from other places. It means that we won't be using Zoom anymore. We will be using other things. We won't be using Google and Amazon and things like this. So it's not just the BDS movement stopping using Israeli products and things. We're going to have to stop using all sorts of corporate things, because the world is in a really difficult stage at the moment, really a crucial time. We have terrible climate change, biodiversity loss, human rights abuses all over, endless wars, forever wars. And this is because we have not got the right structures. And our society has been crumbling for a very long time, with all of the cuts and all of the ways in which we support the rich and the big and the powerful, and we're ignoring the poorer segments of our society. So in a rich country, we have so much poverty, it's ridiculous. There's a lot that we're going to have to be doing in the and one of the things we can do is on Saturday, at least, stand up against the genocide and against the prescription of a peaceful organisation.
You've said that Britain is moving towards fascism. You've talked about certain rights being undermined by the present government, important to say, by a Labour government, which is headed up by a former lawyer, a former director of public prosecutions. And it sounds to me like you think that the US and the UK are on the same track, even though ostensibly they're governed by people who are meant to be very different. Do you think that effectively Britain and America right now are headed in the same direction? Because that might be something of a controversial statement for Labour voters. Even if they agree with you, they're against prescription of Palestine action, they might say, hold on a second, Keir Starmer is not Donald Trump.
I don't know that it's very controversial. I mean, ever since the British Empire collapsed, if you like, we have been the dog's body of the US. So, we have all these US air bases here. We're having nuclear weapons from the US coming back to Lakenheath. They're there now. We basically do whatever the US wants us to do. So we have always been a lapdog to the US. And the US empire itself will crumble at some stage. But yeah, I don't think it's very controversial at all. We're going the same way. We are going towards a dictatorship, and step by step we can see it. If we don't learn from history, and there's a fascinating book by a Turkish author saying how to lose a country, the 7 steps towards fascism and dictatorship, and she explains what happened in Turkey under Erdogan, and that is what is happening here.
So a final question, what's next for the Defend Our Juries campaign?
Well, Saturday, we'll have 1,000+ people sitting down in Parliament Square or nearby, and we'll see what the police and the state will do. And if they come down hard, the next time we'll have even more and even more, because we are facing repression. And if you face repression, you can't stop. Basically, what's going on in the world means that more and more people are going to have to stand up and speak out very, very clearly. And if that means getting arrested for terrorism, then we have to get arrested for terrorism. And I think people will come. I mean, I don't know that the press has really been covering hundreds of thousands of people on the streets pretty much every other week in central London saying this is disgusting. Lots of Jewish people coming out and saying, look, Jewishness is not the same as Zionism. What's happening in Israel is Zionist, it is not Jewishness. So you have people across the board, Muslims, Christians, Jewish people, people of no faith, all sorts of ethnicities coming together day after day after day in their little country towns. Like here in Wales, we have little things going on almost every week to do with Palestine and resisting it. And, people are just absolutely disgusted with what's going on. So Saturday will be a great day when 1,000+ people will be sitting down there, writing on their placards, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine action." And we hope that at long last, the ban will be lifted.
Well, that was peace activist Angie Zelter speaking with me earlier today. The prescription of Palestine action is being challenged in courts, and its co-founder, Huda Amori, has been granted permission for a judicial review of the decision to equate the non-violent protest group with the likes of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And Amori's lawyers say that while Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is busy talking a big game about why Palestine action needs to be prescribed to the press, her claims about how dangerous the group is are not backed up with evidence. For example, Cooper told the BBC this last month. There may be people who are objecting to prescription who don't know the full nature of this organisation because of court restrictions on reporting while serious prosecutions are underway. But it's really important that no one is in any doubt that this is not a non-violent organisation. But none of the evidence provided by the Home Office in open court actually supports this extraordinary claim, according to Amori's lawyers anyway. And they argue that anything important enough to brief in the press should be in the Home Office's open case and available to open court. Bernberg Pierce, representing Huda Amori, has sent a letter to the government saying as much. Here's an excerpt. The cynical media campaign reflects a fundamental lack of respect for court proceedings and either indicates an attempt by your client to influence media coverage through assertions which she cannot evidence, or is reflective of a serious breach of her duty of candour in these proceedings. The proper place for your client to advance her case is in court. Your client's approach in relation to briefing the media with a wholly different basis for prescription is entirely improper and a breach of her duty to the court. If your client has evidence to support her assertions, this ought to have been disclosed. As she has not, she must cease her misleading campaign immediately. We're talking about the Home Secretary here. And the argument, I think, is overwhelmingly powerful. The Novara media has actively been trying to get clarity from the Attorney General on how the prescription of Palestine action will affect journalists and the media. Days before the ban, we wrote to the Attorney General and the Home Office with a series of questions about how the prescription would affect our reporting and what the risks for journalists were under the 2000 Terrorism Act. Novara Media has now received a reply from the Home Office where it failed to answer all of our questions bar one. After 6 long weeks, the Home Office confirmed that it is not an offence to simply criticise the government's decision to prescribe Palestine action. Thank goodness for that. But the Home Office also reminded us that there is no absolute defence of journalism under counter-terrorism legislation. You can read our article on that response, as well as our original letter, over at novaramedia.com. That letter from Bernberg Pierce is just, I use the word guardedly, I'm going to say it is extraordinary. It is extraordinary. You had the Labour Party in opposition talking about how the Tories were taking us to fascism, and at the same time, you've got a Home Secretary now in 2025 saying that we can clamp down on civil liberties, we can criminalise a protest organisation, a non-violent protest organisation, and the reason why I'm doing that is for reasons you can't really know, but it'll come out in the court proceedings, but of course it doesn't come out in the court proceedings because it seemingly doesn't even exist. So she's lying, but she's also fundamentally, it appears, we could be wrong, but there's no evidence to suggest otherwise. She's lying, it appears, and at the same time, she's effectively waging a communications war, an information war through the media. You're trying to misinform people via the media in order to clamp down on their civil liberties. If that's not Trumpian, I don't know what is. But don't forget, you have to vote for these people to stop fascism. Before we go, I just want to give another big shout out tonight to our merch. I said it at the top of the show. I said it in the middle of the show, rather. These are great t-shirts. I have so many. Not a single one has a hole in it. Organic cotton, do the right thing. Get one for yourself or a loved one. It helps us. It's also good for the planet. These are zero carbon supply chains fundamentally, close to zero. Unionized labor, organic cotton. What else do you need? Anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in this evening. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.